Okay, folks, so let's have a quick look at Adobe Animate. So this is essentially the application. To access it, you would go to Applications, so the Finder here, Applications, and then Adobe Animate is there. We're going to be using Adobe Illustrator as well, which is here, and you would just double click and then double click again to access the applications, and they will simply open. So first of all, let's just have a quick look here. So Adobe Animate allows us to construct animations in a quite a simplistic way, and I'll give you a quick demo on what we're doing with that. So if I first of all go to here, to New File, and you can see a dialog box opens. You've got HD, Full HD, 4K, and Standard. Let's just stick to HD and then Create, and it gives you a panel from which to work. Here we are, wonderful. Currently, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be importing objects from Illustrator into the stage, and I will show you how we're going to do that. So if I now go to Illustrator, which is here, and then again in Illustrator we're going to go to New File, A4, and then Landscape. That's absolutely fine. And just wait for that to open. So here we are in Illustrator, and you can see the artboard. So what I want to do for ease of use is excuse me, is generate some examples here that we can use in the Adobe Animate. So first of all, we're going to use the AI, the artificial intelligence tool in Illustrator. You will eventually be generating and illustrating your own assets to go into Animate, but for the time being I'm just going to demonstrate how this can be used and how we can just generate objects quickly. So first of all, let's go with bird in flight with large wings. So bird in flight with large wings. This is again it's generating an AI image for us that just matches that example. Do I like any of these? I think I can probably potentially use this one. So that's absolutely fine. So in Adobe Animator, we're going to try and manipulate the structure of this bird so that it appears to be flying in a particular way. So that is absolutely fine. What I need to do first of all is to save it. So now I'm going to go, File, Export, Export for Screens. So this is just telling Illustrator where I want this image to go, and I'm going to go into the desktop and to a folder. Which folder shall I use? Okay, let's just create a new folder, so bear with me. Let's just go to List, and I'm going to create a new folder here and just call it Animate. Animate Objects. Okay, so that's where I'm going to put this for the time being. So just once you've done that, you've told Illustrator where the object is being saved. I'm just going to export, and that's fine. And then I'm going to produce a second artboards file new, because I also want a landscape. So the same process, A4 landscape, create, file new. Obviously I only want one. Thank you. Perfect. So this time, so I have my bird AI object. Now I want a landscape. So landscape with trees. So again, generating a artificial intelligence and AI based image, which I want to use as my landscape. Beautiful. So I've got some examples here. So these are my examples, and it will kind of start to make sense. So I'm just duplicating these just so I have more of a kind of panoramic thing going on. That's fine. To duplicate, you would just press Alt and then click on the keyboard. So Alt click on the keyboard. Just to duplicate to create a slightly denser landscape. That's absolutely fine. So I'm going to File, Export, and then this time export as, and then call it Landscape. Maybe Landscape 1. And then that's the folder on the desktop that I want to place it in. Animate Objects, and then just export. And then that's absolutely fine. And then export. So finished with Illustrator for the time being. Let's go back to Animate, which I should be able to do. There we go. So here is Animate. So I want to, those objects that we've created in Illustrator, and like I said, you will be creating your own assets in Illustrator at some point, but for the time being, let's just play with some secondary examples. We're appropriating some examples so we can utilize them here. So first of all, I'm going to create so I'm in Adobe Animate, and I'm going to go down to the timeline and create a new layer. So I have two layers. First layer is there, so now I will go to File, and I want to import to Stage. So import to Stage, and then I'll go to my desktop, and then these are my objects. So I can first of all import the landscape, which is here. And you can see it's absolutely huge, so you can go up to here and show all. That's fine, it's just huge, but it doesn't really matter. And then go to layer 1, and this time we will import to Stage the bird. So import to Stage, and there is my bird. And it should be here somewhere. Maybe it's actually underneath everything. There it is. Okay, so there's the bird. Okay, that's absolutely fine. So we now know that by looking at the layers, you can open and close the eyes. So I know that layer 1 is the bird. So if I right click on the layer and then go to, actually you don't need to do that. You can just click once on the layer and then just change the layer name to bird. Click again on layer 2 and I know that's the landscape. So it's often really helpful just to identify what's what. Okay, so on the landscape, I'm going to right click, transform, scale, just so I can make the landscape slightly smaller. That's fine. There's the artboard that we're using, the canvas. That's absolutely fine. Okay, so I've got my two separate objects here. So let's focus on the landscape initially. So I'm going to close the eye of the bird just so I can see the landscape. Now what I want to do with the landscape is I want to have the landscape moving across the panel. Okay, but actually we'll have it going from left to right. So I'll have it going that way. So first of all, we are going to check that we have that there. That's fine. So that's a keyframe. And then if I go to, let's say, okay, I can go straight to 135, click there, and then by pressing F6 on my keyboard, it generates a keyframe. Now what I can now do is move, using the selection tool, simply move along to that point, and by doing that, I'm telling Animator that I want the object to move from essentially left to right, but it currently is not animated. So what I need to do is to right click within the layer and then create classic tween. And now you can see that the landscape is moving from left to right, which is what I wanted it to do. And it's moving quite slowly, which is absolutely fine. So that's simply by placing a keyframe at the end of the timeline. By pressing F6 you activate the keyframe, and then to activate the animation you have to right click and select classic tween. That essentially creates the motion between them. So that's my landscape positioning. That's all I wanted to do initially with that. Let's go back to the bird, and I've closed the eye, so let's open the eye of the bird. This time I'll close the eye for landscape, and now I'll also zoom in a little more. Okay, so there's the bird, and I want to animate the bird in a particular way. First of all, let's just enlarge it so I'm still on transform, so it's a nice large bird. That's fine. So what we can do, we can add a structure to the bird that allows us to then manipulate the wings and the body in different ways. So the way we do that is we go over here to the Asset Warp tool, and we click once, and then we can click, and essentially what you'll be doing now is dropping pins onto the object. So if I start maybe here, and you can see once you click once you have this structure that you can see, and effectively what we're now doing is inserting bones onto the object. So if I just click once, so every time you click you're inserting a pin, and all of these pins can be moved. So I've come to that point and I want to go back to my original location in the center, so you just move back to the center and click again, and obviously these are the wings, and the more bones you have, the more pins you have, the more opportunity you have to animate and change the structure. So again, that's fine. We'll come back here. Maybe we'll come back there and come back to the center and drop one there. So we'll see what that does. That might be enough. And you don't need to click at that point, you just move it off the object. So at this point what I can now start to do is to manipulate the structure of the bird. I suppose we're wanting it to appear to be flying, but we'll just see where we get to. So on that keyframe, if I go back to the selection tool, you can see that you lose all of the frames, all of the pins, so you go back on the pin tool. So using the pin tool and then clicking on the bone sections, you can see that as you're clicking on the, I suppose, the pivot points, those central red points, you can manipulate the bird. You can manipulate the structure of the bird, and that's because it's a bitmap image in Illustrator, it has just automatically become a symbol which we can animate. So that's my first point. So on that keyframe, now I want to add another keyframe. We're going to be adding multiple keyframes so that we can continue the animation of the bird. So I'm just going to click on 35. Now immediately you can't see the bird, but if I press F6 on the keyboard, the bird appears, and this is our second point of animation. So again, you just consider what you want to happen next. So I'm just manipulating the wings, and it is a case of experimenting to see what can be manipulated. And again, you're putting these pins in place, and sometimes the pins are really effective, and other times you put too many pins in place and it's not as effective as you want it to be. So that's that one done. So we have the first keyframe and the second keyframe. I'm going to move my blue bar again, maybe to 65, drop it, just select first of all, and then press F6 again to insert the third keyframe, and again continue to manipulate the bird just by clicking on the bone structure in the central sections, in the circles, and just manipulating those. and I think I'll then move on. And then again, F6. Move the wings back up again. So it's a little bit time consuming, but it'll be quite interesting to see what happens. Again, think about the flight, think about the structure, think about what you want the bird, the characteristics of the bird and how you want it to move. I'll do another one here, 120, F6 on the keyboard to insert the keyframe, and again, continue to manipulate predominantly the wings. You can obviously move, have some subtle changes and shifts in movement as well. And then one more, 135. Again, F6 to insert the keyframe, and then let's bring that wing back up. Maybe I'll move the whole body slightly, move the tail that way as well, and perhaps just extend the head out slightly as well. Okay, so I now have my structure that looks something like that. The bird it's being animated, it's doing something, but currently if I was to press play, you would see it just does it in a very staggered way, which is absolutely not what we want. So what we need to do is we need to add a classic tween, which is essentially adding motion between, hence the tween, between these two, between the keyframes. So you just click between the two black points, right click, and then create classic tween. And you keep doing that between the black points, between the keyframes, create classic tween, click, right click, create classic tween, and then finally click, right click, create classic tween. So in theory, now, if I press the space bar, we should have some motion. Okay. And also we can bring the landscape back in. So again, we had that motion. It's doing something a little bit odd, but there's definitely motion taking place. So that's initially the kind of process we're looking at. And again, you can obviously go back into it and tweak it and manipulate it and develop it. Or what I would probably do in Illustrator is I would remove, or maybe even in Photoshop, I'd remove the white background. What we can also do is we can loop. So it just continues to move. So if I just move my blue bar to the beginning, click on the loop option there. Now currently if I press play, it just loops in that tiny section here. Obviously I can expand to the 135 section and then press your space bar and it will just loop the entire piece. Okay, so that's where we're going initially. And again, the idea is that we then build your own landscape, you build your own bird in Illustrator as an object, which we then manipulate successfully in Adobe Animate. The final stage would be to publish it. Now to publish, you go to the right-hand corner where it says Quick Share and Publish, and you simply click, and then you simply click Publish. And then you've got the options video or animated GIF. We would go with video MP4 because we can place this object, this animation into Premiere Pro to continue editing and manipulating. But for the time being, that's where we are, and that's okay. So we have the bird moving. You can see that you can add bones to the structure of an object. So we can apply this to a character that's attempting to walk or dance. You can apply it to lots of different things, but you can see that it's quite an effective flowing animation, and we'll develop this as we go. Wonderful. Thanks for watching. I've been Jason Jones, and this has been Creative Art Digital.